All right, so in this video we're going to discuss chapter 5, which is sales and cash collection business process. So in the previous video lecture, well, two video lectures actually, we have discussed the purchase process, or sometimes it's called also purchase to pay process. So that's when we, as a buyer, place a purchase order with the supplier for certain items that we're missing, and when the items are delivered, we're waiting for the invoice. Invoice comes in, we record the invoice, and then we disburse the payment on the invoice. So purchasing process is very popular in the companies for obvious reasons. Manufacturing companies or sales organizations have purchasing process. In the manufacturing environment, obviously you have to buy raw materials in order to convert them into the finished product. And even in the service organizations such as CNU, for example, there is a purchasing function. So what kind of stuff CNU buys? Well, computers, office supplies such as paper for the printers, markers, buildings we buy occasionally. So therefore, purchasing is very popular and very common business process. Another very common and very popular business process is sales and collection, or sometimes it's also called sales to cash. So the original, well, let's actually go through that. So I'm going to upload this set of slides on Scholar so that you will be able to kind of view them as well. So let's kind of go through the generic sequence of steps in the sales process. So what normally happens is company prepares a quote which describes what products and service they provide to the customers. Sometimes it happens in response to the customer's request. Oftentimes that actually happens when the customer and the company do the transaction for the first time. So for example, let's say I'm trying to find a new supplier. So I'm going to identify the companies that supply the product, and then I'm going to formally place a request for the quote. So I'm going to say, here's what I need, how much do you charge for that, how quickly you can deliver that, and what are the terms of the delivery. Okay, so in this case, a sales organization prepares the quote, and based on that, the buyer decides whether or not they're going to place an order. So once the quote has been considered and the buyer decided to place an order, that's what happens. So sometimes it's also called sales order. So let me actually modify it right here. Okay, sales order, as opposed to purchase order. So the difference between the sales order and the purchase order is the following. When the company places the purchase order, that means that the company is the buyer. Purchase order is placed with the vendor, with the supplier. When company receives the sales, when the company sells something to the customers, that is called sales order. So purchase order is something that we buy, sales order is something that we sell. That's basically the difference. So when the buyer, let me actually change it here. Buyer places the sales order for all the parts which are quoted by the company. Alright, so after that, when the sales order is formally placed, when it's accepted by the organization, by the company, it becomes a binding agreement, legally binding agreement. So the company then ships the product to the buyer, or sometimes when there's nothing to ship, it's possible, right? So the buyer placed an order with me as a supplier, as a sales organization, but I just don't have these items in the stock. So coming back to the example that we actually considered in the SAP exercise, if I'm the sales organization, such as GBI, Global Bikes Incorporated, the buyer, small bike shop, for example, places an order with several professional bikes with my company, and if I don't have these bikes, I have to first manufacture them. So therefore, if the product is not in the inventory, then I'm going to buy the necessary components from my suppliers in order to manufacture these items. Okay, so after that, manufacturing takes place, and once I have the item in storage, then shipment happens. So I pull the items out of the warehouse shelves, box them, and when the carrier, when the truck shows up at the door of my warehouse, I just basically load these items into the truck and send the truck on the road. So that basically is the shipment. So company, the seller, ships the product to the customer. Well, after that, the moment when the product crosses the kind of the truck door and is inside the truck, legally the seller does not own this product anymore. So ownership switched from the buyer, from the seller to the buyer. So, and this is the moment when, from the accounting standpoint, I can recognize the sales and I have the right to invoice the customer. So the next step is the seller company sends the invoice to the customer, and now we wait until the payment comes in. So we have to collect the payment, deposit that into the bank, and record the payment, of course, in the ERP system. So this whole course revolves around the idea that everything that we do is recorded in the centralized database, and we have some kind of accounting information system such as ERP, SAP would be one example, in place that manages all the records, all the data inside the inside my database. Okay, so let's take a look at the generic BPMN business process modeling notation model. So here we have two swim lanes. The company, the seller organization, and the customer, the buyer. So generally speaking, just like in the purchasing process, if you remember when we discussed purchasing, when I place an order with the seller, when I place the purchase order with my supplier, I don't really know what happens inside my supplier. They may have the items in the warehouse, they may not have them, they may need to manufacture them. This part is hidden from me. So therefore, customer is being the outside party in this whole process. I don't have any visibility in what's going on inside their company, and quite frankly, I don't care really, right? So all I do is I manage the processes inside my organization. So this is kind of an interaction, collaboration model between the company, the seller, and the buyer, the customer. So customer asks us for the quote for the product, and we provide the quote. Customer decides whether or not to place an order. Once they decide to place an order, we receive the order and record that order, obviously. Then we have to prepare the product. It may be ready already. It may be sitting in the warehouse just waiting to be shipped. It may not be readily available. So whatever we do, make sure that we have the items that customer requested. So after that, we deliver the order. That means that we ship, it's on the road, and therefore the order comes out. And after that, I have, this is the moment when I recognize the sales revenue. So I have to generate the invoice, send the invoice to the customer, wait for the payment to come in, receive and record the payment, and that is basically the end of the business process from the beginning to the end. So this is sales to cash process. Okay, so now let's go ahead and break it down in a little bit more detail, so kind of make a little bit more visible. So a refined version of the same process. So the moment when I receive the order, all I have to do really is so in the previous one, I receive an order, then I prepare the product, whatever that might mean, right? It might be as simple as go to the warehouse, pull it down from the shelves, package the order into the box, print out the packing slip, put it on the top of the order, then close the box, put it into the truck, and that basically is the delivery. Or it can be, I don't have really items, so I have to manufacture them first. So this is a more detailed version of the same process. So when we receive the order, we check the product availability. Okay, so like for example, let's say small bike shop orders 5 professional bikes from me. I check in the system, do I have them in the warehouse? If the answer is yes, then yeah, fine. I basically, well, here it says apply graphics. That's a different example, but in my case with professional bikes, all I have to do really is to pick them and pack, if you remember these 2 steps, from the SAP process, right? We create the outbound delivery. If you remember from the exercise that you were doing, we create the outbound delivery. Then next step is picking and packing. Next step is shipment. So that's when we post the goods issue. That's really delivery step, right? So if the product is available, then all I have to do is pick and pack the product, then deliver, invoice, and wait for the payment to come in. But if the product is not available, then I have to go through the purchasing process, which we discussed in chapter 6 last week. And that basically is the whole process in and of itself. When we create the purchase requisition, when we issue the purchase order, when we wait for the inventory to come in, then we receive the inventory. So we have to record the inventory receipt, then we have to wait for the invoice to come in, record the invoice, and then we post the payment. So this animal right here is a whole beast in and of itself, right? So therefore it's a combined process. It has its own internal structure. That's why we have this plus sign here, okay? And if the product is not available, so this is an exception event, right? If the product is not available, for example, let's say I'm ordering frames, right? So the customer ordered some bikes from me. I call my supplier and say, hey, do you have frames? They say no, and you know what? We're basically not going to have frames for another month. Okay, so product not available. Then I have to contact my customer who placed the purchase order and say, hey, sorry, I thought that I could get frames. I cannot, so therefore I'm canceling your order. Okay, so this is an exception. But if I do have the frames, so my supplier sends me the frames, then I manufacture the product, and then I ship the product out of the door, and essentially go through the same series of steps. Wait for the I invoice the customer, wait for the payment to come in, record the payment in the system, and deposit that in the bank. All right. So let's kind of discuss the business rules. So what are the business rules? In the previous lecture, actually, when we discussed the purchasing process in chapter 6, we did discuss controls, and essentially business rules implement internal control activities. Okay, so business rules help to ensure that a company operates efficiently and effectively. It achieves its organizational objectives. It has reliable reporting, and it complies with all applicable laws and regulations. Let me give you an example of the business rule. Okay, so it's not unusual for the company to run sales on credit, right? So that's the case when we receive the order, we ship the order, but we don't have cash immediately to deposit, so therefore we prepare the order first, we send it, and then after that we invoice the customer, and later we receive the payment. That's pretty standard practice. So in a sense, we're trusting the customer to send us a payment down the road, right? But customers are different. So some customers are more reliable in terms of payment than others. So for example, let's say I have a history with one customer that every time when I send them the invoice, they pay it within 30 days. Well, in other cases, I have customers that even after 30 days, the payment did not come in, so I had to review their account, send them another invoice, and then 30 days after that, review their account again, send them another invoice with a reminder, etc. So therefore, different customers are different. So in order for me to protect my accounts receivables and cash eventually, I may extend customers different credit line, the amount of credit that they receive, so I can sell them without immediately collecting the payments. So reliable customers, for example, I can approve up to $5,000 sales on credit. Less reliable customers I can approve for $3,000. Unreliable customers I can say cash only. Okay, there is no sale, so they have to send the payment immediately together with their sales order, or else I'm not shipping that. Okay, so business rule, an example of the business rule in that case would be each time when I sell customer on credit, so I'm really recording the accounts accounts receivables. I have to check the current outstanding balance with that customer. Let's say, for example, bikes, Philly Bikes, my small customer, places an order for 2 professional bikes in the amount of, let's say, $4,500. Okay, so I have to check if they still have the required credit line with me. So I may have to pull this specific customer information from the computerized information system and see that, you know, Philly Bikes has a $5,000 credit limit with me, and they already placed an order 2 weeks ago for $2,000. So the remaining credit line is $3,000, and now they're placing an order for $4,500, which actually is above the remaining credit line. So I may decide, well, you know, unfortunately I'm going to have to either reject that order because it goes above the approved credit line, or request them to pay part of their outstanding balance in order for me to still be able to sell them on credit, so that overall they still remain under total outstanding balance of $5,000 or less dollars. So that's an example of the business rule. So essentially, business rules are constraints on the process. Okay, so they are in place in order to protect the organization from, let's say, extending too much credit, or physical inventory, for example. Okay, so these are approvals, authorizations, verifications, reconciliations. These are some of the control activities. And security of assets and segregation of duties. So let's talk about security of assets. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that means that my inventory, for example, very simple stuff. Okay, my inventory, for example, is stored in a secure warehouse. So in the warehouse, I have security cameras installed. People who have physical access to the warehouse, the only people who have physical access to the warehouse are the employees who are working in the warehouse, right? So authorized personnel and security personnel. Okay, so if I'm working in accounting, for example, then I'm not allowed to even go to the warehouse, because why would I want to do it? Okay, so physical security of assets. Segregation of duties, we're going to actually talk about that on the next slide, but segregation of duties is a very important business rule or internal control, which essentially, we discussed that several times, essentially what segregation of duties is, different steps of the business process should be subdivided between different employees. The simple logic behind segregation of duties is that if too much control over the business process is concentrated in hands of one employee, that's a risk for the organization. So, for example, if the person who receives, who ships the orders, customers' orders out of the warehouse, is the same person who receives the payments, then it's possible, for example, that I will ship more items. Well, I ship the same amount of items, but I record that I shipped, let's say, that I shipped less. Okay, so instead of 5, like I'm shipping 5 bikes, but I'm recording that I shipped 4 bikes. Okay, so therefore, when the payment for 5 bikes come in, I'm going to take the payment for 1 bike and just basically steal it. Okay. So if I'm the same person who ships inventory and who handles the cash, that represents the security issue, that represents the risk for the organization. So therefore, people who control different steps of the business process have to be different people with different amount of duties, responsibilities, and control and access rights to the data in the system. So that's the idea behind segregation of duties. So let's go ahead and take a look at a simple table that basically gives an idea of what segregation of duties will look like in the organization for this specific sales business process. So we're going to start with the first step, quoting, providing the quote. Okay. So the goal of this step is obviously when the buyer asks you to provide you a quote, that should be done quickly and accurately. So therefore, the goal is provide quotes promptly and accurately. Okay. So This is the business rule. Okay, employee must provide quote within 1 business day of the request. Any quotes for more than $5,000 must be approved by somebody else, by the approving manager. So that's one example of the internal control. So big items such as orders over $5,000, somebody else must review them, because obviously they represent substantial amount of cash, substantial amount of assets that will be shipped out of the warehouse. So therefore we have to have somebody else, like second pair of eyes, to look over that order to make sure that nothing fishy is going on. So that's segregation of duties in action, if you want. Okay. Access control. So we discussed in the previous lecture that there are two types of controls. Access controls is on the level of the system. Who has access to what screens? So that is done basically, for example, my login into the system. So if the company operates ERP system, I have to log in, as you know, right? I have to provide my password and login ID. And then based on my login and password, the system, that's part of the system configuration. Let's say my role in the organization is to review the quote. So I'm working in the sales department, and I'm preparing the quotes for the customers, and I'm sending the quotes out there. Okay, so quotes are not sales, right? This is kind of a promise that, hey, me as a seller, this is what I can deliver. These are the items, these are the prices, this is the amount available for sale right now. So from that standpoint, I should not see the actual orders. I should not see the shipments. I should not see the invoices, and I should not see the payments, because that is completely that doesn't concern me at all. Okay, so I'm not even dealing with sales orders. Okay, I'm just preparing the quotes and sending them to the potential buyers. That's all. So therefore, on my login, I will see just screens associated with creating new quotes and sharing them with customers, nothing else. Okay, so employee preparing the quotes cannot modify established products and service prices. So products and prices should be established by somebody else, right? So all I have to do really is to access the product information, the pricing information, and based on that were set up in the system already before me, generate the quotes and share them with the customers. So that's access control. Then application control. Application controls are things that are built into the software, in a sense. So in other words, really the goal of information system is to minimize errors and ensure what's called data integrity. Data integrity means three things, really. Okay, it's accuracy, it's validity, and it's completeness. So accuracy is a very big thing, especially in accounting information system, for obvious reasons, right? So for example, let's say the customer orders certain item, let's say professional bike. Okay, professional bike should be already set up in the system for me by somebody else, obviously, and all I have to do really is access the information about that product, all kinds of data about that pricing, for example, where the inventory is located right now, so where I can ship that from what plant, right? And all I have to do really, so instead of typing in the on the screen professional bike and then hitting the enter button, all I have to do really is to look it up in the system, preferably by the ID. Okay, so the general rule of thumb in any kind of information system is humans screw up. That's just a general statement. Okay, so when people type something, they oftentimes make mistakes. They mistype numbers, they mistype words, they click on the wrong things on the screen, so they do all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay, may not be because they're stupid or ill-intended. It could be just honest mistake. But the rule of thumb is the less keystrokes humans are doing on the screen, the more reliable and the more accurate information is recorded in the database. That's just it. Okay, so therefore, preferably, human input should be very limited. So ideally, I should type the ID number in some field on the screen, then hit the submit button, and the system should show me what corresponds to that ID. Okay, so when I'm providing the quote, application control is system must provide range and limit checks, for example, okay, and default values. What kind of limit checks? Well, let's say, for example, it's very unlikely that somebody will place an order for 100 bikes for me. Okay, so I don't have customers that big that order 100 bikes from me in one sales order. So each time when I'm preparing the quote, when the person preparing the quote enters in the quantity field a number which is greater than 100, the system should show the red flag. It should flash a message that says, "Are you sure 100 bikes? That doesn't seem reasonable, my friend." Okay, so application controls are features of the software that are programmed in place in order to make sure that nothing unreasonable or unusual enters the system, either accidentally or because somebody doing it on purpose. Okay, so that's the first step. Provide the quote. Second step: when receive the order, so when the customer, the buyer, placed an order with our organization. Obviously, we want to record the order as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible, and also ensure that the customer credit is authorized if we sell the customer on the credit and record the sales in the accounts receivables, right? So, employee authority. Employee must record orders within 1 hour of receipt. That makes sense. As quickly as possible. All orders over $5,000 must be approved, just like the quotes. Over $5,000 must be approved by somebody else, independent employee. And credit manager must approve any credit sales in excess of $1,000. So, if, for example, a customer calls me up and says, "Hey, I want to order 2,000 worth of stuff," then okay, that's great, but I can't make this decision on my own. My credit manager has to approve that. All right, access controls. Employees accepting orders cannot modify established product and service prices. So just like this one, when we were preparing the quote, employee accepting the order cannot approve the request for customer credit over than $1,000. Well, we kind of discussed that. Okay. System again must provide order number control. What does that mean? Order number control means that the sales orders that we're entering have to be sequentially ordered. So if yesterday my last sales order that I entered in the system was number 45, when I'm starting the day today and the customer calls in and places the sales order, the next order that will be generated must be number 46. Again, range and limit checks, just like what we discussed, right? So if I'm entering the order for 100 bikes, for example, the system says it's not reasonable. There are no such customers, no such big customers. So go back and check. You probably mistyped something, my friend. Audit trail should be created. So when the sales order is recorded in the system, we should be always be able to access that sales order and verify that. And you've seen that actually happening in SAP, right? When we enter the sales order number and click the display button, and after that we can see the details. And moreover, if you remember what you did on each step, hopefully when you were doing SAP exercise, we can go to the document flow and it will show us all documents, right? We start from the sales order, and then after that we have the outbound delivery linked with the sales order. For the outbound delivery, we have steps which are picking and packing, and also what was it called? Goods issue, post goods issue. That's essentially shipment, right? And after that, we have invoice, which is linked with outbound delivery, and after that, we have payment, which is linked with the invoice, which is linked with outbound delivery, which is linked with the original sales order. And that, my friends, is audit trail. Okay, so I can track the entire process from the initiation, from the very first step, creating the sales order, up until the moment when I receive and deposit cash. Okay, and obviously system must link the quote from the previous step to that sales order. Okay, All right, so going forward. Then after that, we either have the items in the warehouse, in which case we deliver them, the items, or we don't have them, in which case we have to initiate the production. If we don't have the parts for production, we have to go through the purchasing process. So we're kind of skipping that portion. So delivering the order, also known as shipment, obviously. The goal is to deliver that promptly. So if customer wants the delivery to be on a certain date, then delivery has to be on the date that the customer requested, obviously, and then ensure that customer accepts the delivery. So in other words, we have to make sure that order that we ship to the customer is for the right items, for the right quantities. We have to do the quality control, so we shouldn't ship any damaged items just hoping that they will accept and nobody will notice. So all of that maximizes, of course, the chance of customer accepting the delivery. So employee shipping the order must verify the shipment matches the order. Obviously, before you package the items into the box and put the packing slip on the top of that, it's a good idea to bring the original purchase order on the screen and make sure that you're shipping the right things in the right quantities. Okay, but here's the access control. Employee shipping the product from the warehouse should not be able to modify a sales order. So in other words, on the SAP, in the SAP example, I should have, as a person who is shipping the order, I should be able to display the order, but I should not be able to modify the order. So when I'm logging into the system, I should not have access to the screen modify the order. And that is an example of the access control. Application control. Delivery, when the screen pops up with the delivery information, the shipment date must default to the current date. That's pretty obvious, right? Also, the delivery information must be automatically supplied by the system. So, for example, I'm shipping 5 professional bikes to my customer, Philly bikes. Okay, so once I pick that sales order from the system, it should automatically pull out of the database who is the customer, what is the sales order number, what are the items, what are the quantities, and all I have to do really is to hit the print button. It will come out of the printer. That would be my packing slip. All I have to do is take it from the printer, put it in the box, seal the box, and put it in the truck. So the system should automatically supply the appropriate label information, and it's only for viewing purposes, no modifications allowed. So once the items are out of the back door and I loaded them in the truck, that's the moment when I can start invoicing my customers. So the goal of this step is, of course, invoice the customers promptly. We don't want to wait too long because now we need cash, right? Now we have a legal right to invoice and collect the cash. So therefore, here is the requirement. Employee must invoice the customer no later than 3 business days after the shipment. For example, that's the business rule, right? Access control. Employee who is preparing the invoice cannot modify the original sales order, cannot modify the delivery information, the shipment information from the previous step, and before issuing the invoice must make sure that the shipment was made. This step is actually automated in SAP. I believe I forgot to mention that when I was recording the lecture on the SAP. The SAP is essentially, when the SAP was started, it was originally an accounting information system. So in SAP, if you remember, the steps were of the exercise that you did. The steps were create the sales order first, then after that create the outbound delivery, then after that create picking and packing, modify the outbound delivery, record picking and packing, then modify it again when you're sending goods on the road, when you're shipping them, and that's called post goods issue. After that, create invoice. After that, collect the payment. The system will not allow you to create the invoice unless you post the goods issue. So, skipping over that step, the system will tell you. So, if, for example, I created the outbound delivery, I picked and packed the order, and I didn't send it yet, so I didn't post the goods issue. If I'm going straight to the record the invoice, the system will tell me no can do because goods issue was not posted. You didn't ship them. So SAP is taking care of that step automatically before issuing the this step. Before issuing the invoice, must make sure that the shipment was made. SAP will simply not allow you to generate the invoice, even less record the payment, unless there was a shipment, unless you posted the goods issue. Okay, so this is one of the internal controls. Obviously, I can't invoice for things that I didn't ship yet, because legally I'm not allowed to recognize the sales at that point. Okay, so again, system must apply the invoice number automatically generated by the system. Customer information must be automatically filled from the previous two steps, from the shipment and from the original purchase sales order. It should be the same customer, right? So system will automatically provide you with the customer information, and that cannot be changed. So I cannot invoice the wrong customer for the same sales order. It should be the same customer who placed the sales order. Finally, after I sent out the invoice, obviously all I have to do really is to wait, right? So receive and post payment when the payment comes in. The goal of this process is receive the payments and deposit them in the bank quickly, promptly. So employee receiving payment must record the receipts immediately and deposit to the bank on the same day. So that's the business rule. Okay. So the payment cannot just sit in somebody's desk just waiting to be deposited. So access controls. Employee receiving the payment cannot modify the original sales order or cannot modify the invoice. And application control, so control provided by the software is, again, system must provide you the cash receipt ID automatically, and it should be sequentially numbered. Cash receipt must default to the current date. So if I'm recording the payment today, then on the screen I should see the today's date filled in automatically by default. And also when I'm recording the payment, hopefully the customer send me the entire payment for the original sales order. So therefore the payment amount must default to the amount of the sales order total. Now of course it can be that customer sends me partial payment, not the full amount. Well, in this case I'm going to record the payment, and only part of the sales order will be allocated to the payment. So there still be unpaid portion, which hopefully will be paid in subsequent cash receipts. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and do the fun part. And the fun part would be designing the database to record the sales process. Now, what you're about to see actually is I'm going to modify the same Word document which I was creating when we discussed the database design for the purchasing process. And you will see that actually sales process and purchasing process are very similar. And indeed, you know, if you're looking at the same process from two different standpoints, for one party it's the sales, for another party it's the purchase. Let's say, for example, I'm manufacturing the bikes, and my customers is small bike shop, Philly Bikes, for example, right? So when the Philly Bikes places an order for 5 professional bikes with me, for them it's a purchasing process, but for me it's the sales process. Okay, so for them I'm the supplier, for me they're the customer. So therefore sales process and purchasing process are very similar in terms of what information we collect. We just need to kind of record them in a different database. So let's kind of go ahead and read the description of the sales process which I sketched out right here on this slide. Okay, sales process. Each product is generally sold on multiple sales orders. Well, that makes sense, right? So if I'm making bikes and I'm selling them to the customers, probably there's going to be more than one sales order from my customers for the same bike model. Each sales order at the same time generally contains many products. So it's possible that Philly Bikes ordered 5 professional bikes from me, 20 helmets, and 50 air pumps, for example, right? So on the same sales order, I have many products listed. One sales order generally can result in many shipments. That's actually something that you saw in your individual SAP exercise, if you remember. There was a customer, Philly Bikes, I believe, right? They ordered, I don't remember what they ordered, quite honestly. There were 15 bikes, I believe, right? And on one shipment, they wanted to ship 5, don't remember, 5 professional bikes and 5 mountain bikes or something. Can't remember right now. And on another shipment, on the next day, they wanted us to ship 5 other bikes. So therefore, one sales order can generate many shipments. It can be driven by the customer. The customer wants you to ship part of the order today and part of the order a week from today. Or it can be that they really wanted to receive that in one shipment, but hey, unfortunately we don't have the whole amount that you ordered right now in the warehouse, so we ship what we can, only part of the order, and then once the rest of the order is here, we'll ship the rest of the order in a different shipment on a different day, right? So one sales order can generally result in many shipments, but one shipment is generally related to only one sales order. Okay, so that's the business rule. Each shipment can result in one. Each shipment results in one cash receipt, and one cash receipt can be done for many shipments. So that again, we did something that we did for the individual exercise, right? If you remember, one order for 15 bikes was split between 2 shipments. Today for 10 bikes and tomorrow for the rest 5 bikes. But we have to create one invoice for both shipments, and we have to collect cash in one cash receipt. So one cash receipt can be done for many shipments. So 2 shipments that we created in the SAP exercise, we used one invoice to invoice both shipments, and we used one cash receipt to receive the payment for both of these shipments. Okay, so after that, one cash receipt, obviously when the cash comes in, we have to put it in the bank, right? So it's deposited into one bank account, and one bank account is related to many cash receipts, right? So if I have a bank account in the bank, obviously I'm depositing money into this account many times, and these money are related to many different cash receipts, probably coming from different customers, right? And then just like purchase order, each sales order, shipment, and cash receipt are related to one customer. So each time when I process the sales order, it's for one customer. When the shipment is done, it goes out to one customer, and when I receive the cash, it is coming from one customer. But each customer is related to many sales orders. They place many orders with me. Many shipments, I make many shipments to one customer generally, and many cash receipts from one customer. And finally, employees. Each sales order, shipment, and cash receipt are processed by one employee, which makes sense, right? So if the shipment is done, I need to know who made the shipment, so employee ID is recorded. But each employee obviously can process many cash orders, sales orders, right? Oh god, sales orders, shipments, and also cash receipts. Okay, so this is my general description of this business process. So what I'm going to do is this. This is my document, Word document, which I created for chapter 6 when we discussed purchasing process. You may recognize it from the video which I posted a couple of weeks ago, right? So we created entity relationship, REA model, resources, events, and agents, and then from that we created a bunch of tables, just like is shown on this picture right here, and obviously we created the relationships within these tables, and then we implemented each table. We created a data schema for each table, right? Well, let's go ahead and do the same thing right here actually. So what I'm going to do is this. Let me put it kind of on the side so I can switch easily back and forth. Okay, so let's go through the same exercise. Each product is generally sold on many sales orders. Okay, so here, and I'm going to actually, what I'm going to do is expand this ER diagram. Okay, so I'm not going to create a separate ER diagram. I'm going to expand that, and you will see that cash, that purchase to pay process, which is right here actually, right? That's what we created a couple of weeks ago for the purchasing process. So purchase to pay process and sales to cash process, they're very, very similar. So by the end of this exercise, you will see that they use almost identical database structure. Okay, so all right, let me go back here. Each product is generally sold on multiple sales orders. Each sales order generally contains many products. Okay, so products I already have, right? I call that table items. Okay, and table items is right here. Well, what do I use table items for? I use table items to record all materials that I'm dealing with, right? It can be raw materials that I buy from my suppliers. It can be semi-finished products that I'm using in my production, such as, for example, wheel assembly, right? Or it can be finished bikes, which result from my production process and which I'm using in sales, in distribution, okay? So table with products, with inventory, with materials, however you want to call it, I'm using to record pretty much everything, really, okay? Things that I buy, things that I make, and things that I sell. So therefore, I'm going to use that table in my sales process, okay? But what's missing is events, right? So before that, I had purchase orders, and now I have sales orders. So this is my new event, right? Each time when the customer places a sales order with me, I have to record that, right? So sales orders. And again, the difference, as we discussed, purchase orders is what I place with my suppliers when I buy inventory from them. Sales orders is what my customers place with me as a buyer when they buy things from me. So according to my description here, one item can be on multiple sales orders, and one sales order can generally contain many items, many products. So therefore, over here, all I have to do, it's just like what we had with purchase orders. Okay, so I'm going to just simply copy paste. All right, and I'm going to place that table down here. Okay, so instead of purchase orders, I'm going to call that sales orders. Okay, and as we discussed, let me insert a relationship, right? One item is listed, generally speaking, on many purchase orders, right? So therefore, I'm gonna copy a lot of things today. Okay, so here I'm gonna say many. All right. So one item is listed on many sales orders, and at the same time, okay, it just pastes in some weird locations, right? And at the same time, one sales order contains generally many products, right? So here I have many-to-many relationship, okay? And we know how to deal with many-to-many, right? So in order for me to break apart a many-to-many relationship, all I have to do really is to insert a junction table, right? So therefore, let me do this. I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to create a new junction table. Oh god. Alright, I'm going to create a new junction table right here, okay? And as we know, each time when I create a junction table, what happens is the many goes onto the side of the junction table, right? And one, let me copy that. Alright. And one goes on the side of where the many used to be. Alright. So that's how I break apart the many-to-many relationships. And of course I have to insert a new line here, right? So items are related to purchase order line items, okay? And at the same time, purchase order line items and sales orders are related to each other, okay? All right, so I just created this junction table, and let me call them, because I'm dealing with sales process, so it's not purchase order line items, but sales order line items. So let's go ahead and create a data schema for these two tables. So I'm going to just continue right here, okay? So all these tables that I had before in my AR diagram are right here, okay? These are the tables which resulted from me modeling the purchase order process, right? When I create purchase orders, send them to my suppliers, right? And suppliers send me the inventory receipts. I receive and record inventory, and these receipts are related to purchase orders, obviously. When suppliers send me invoice, I send cash to the suppliers, and the cash disbursements are related to the bank accounts, and my employees process purchase orders, inventory receipts, and payments, cash disbursements, right? So now I'm going to expand my database. So essentially I'm adding more tables to my database, so therefore I have to create the design for these tables, right? So over here, get rid of some of this space here. Okay, so new table for me right here, which I recorded in the events, sales orders, sales underscore orders, okay? Alright, so let's take a look at what can, well, obviously first things first is each table must have a primary key. So in sales orders, so here in my analog for sales purchases, I had purchase order ID. Here I'm gonna have sales order ID, and obviously this I'm going to underline because it's a primary key. Second, because it's an event, as we discussed, events must have timestamps. So for the purchase order, I had purchase order date. So here I'm gonna have sales order date. Pretty straightforward, right? So I'm almost copy pasting what I had before. Okay. And let me stop here for now. Okay. I'm going to put a comma, meaning that I'm going to expand that thing later on. All right. Next table. I just created, so items, each item was ordered on many sales orders in general, and one sales order was for many items. That's why we created this one right here, sales order line items, right? So I'm going to create a new table here, a junction table, sales orders, sales order line items, okay. And because it's a junction table, obviously what I have to do is create a combined primary key. Remember the rule? When I create the junction table, primary key from table 1 goes here as the foreign key, primary key from table 2 goes here as the foreign key, and we have to combine them to create a combined primary key. So therefore I have to take item ID. Now I'm going to put underscore, just like I did before, item underscore ID. That's my first foreign key. From the sales order table, I have SO underscore ID, okay, and I have to underline both of them because that is my combined primary key. Hopefully it's going to be unique. Okay. So essentially this table, sales order line items, will hold for me the information about the specifics of the sales order, right? Note, reminder, right? Purchase orders. The table, purchase orders, if you look across the table, it does not have any information about what was ordered. It gives you the purchase order ID, when the order was placed, what was the total, who was the buyer, who was the supplier? That's, I'm the buyer, right? That's my supplier. And who is the employee who created and delivered that purchase order to my vendor? That's it, nothing else, right? So purchase order actually does not contain any information about which items I ordered, how many items I ordered, were there any discounts. All that data actually went into the junction table, purchase order line items. Well, I'm going to do exactly the same right here, okay? So I know which item I ordered on which, not me, my customer, right? Which item was ordered on which sales order. So the information missing is quantity. So I'm going to call it sales quantity. In other words, how many units the customer ordered from me, right? Could it be that I gave customers some discounts because they ordered many units from me? Yeah, it can. So therefore, I'm gonna say quantity discounts, quantity underscore discounts. Okay, so let's say my business rule is if the bike shop orders 10 bikes from me, I give them 5% off. 10 bikes or more, I give them 5% off. So if the item number 0019 was ordered on, I don't really care, whatever sales order number, and the sales quantity was 10 or more, then the quantity discount is equal to 5%. Okay, and also what I can do is just like I did before in the purchase order line items, I can calculate line underscore item underscore subtotal. You may remember from our previous lecture when we created this portion of the database, our discussion: should we keep calculated field in the database or should we not keep calculated field in the database? Well, there is no single right or single right answer to this question. Okay, if you ask different database designers, they'll give you different answers. Somebody will say, yeah, you should calculate the item subtotal. Okay, how do you do that? Well, very simple. Here's my item ID. If I look at the table items, I can find item price. That's how much I charge my customers, right? And here's my sales quantity. So if I multiply the quantity by the unit price, that would be my line item subtotal. Well, and then I apply a quantity discount, let's say 5%, and I should take sales quantity multiplied by the unit price, subtract the 5%, let's say, if subtract 5% if that was a discount, and that will give me item subtotal. So technically, strictly speaking, I don't have to keep the line item subtotal because it's calculatable. I take sales quantity, multiply by the unit price, subtract any discounts, and that's my subtotal. Well, some other people will say, well, is it possible that your unit price changes over time? Yeah, it's possible, right? So I changed the pricing of my items, right? So I used to sell this bike for $1,500. Now I decided to raise the price and sell it for $1,550, right? So therefore, the price is different, and therefore the subtotal will be different, right? So some people will say, since your price is not set in stone, it can change, then each time when you create a sales order, you have to calculate the subtotal using the price at the moment when that order was placed. Okay, so here we're doing that. Okay, so each time when I record an item that I'm selling to my customers, not only I record how many units they ordered from me, and also whether or not I give them any discounts, I also calculate the subtotal for that specific item based on the current sales unit price, and I record that in the table, and I keep that as part of my database. Okay, so that's basically my decision to keep the line item subtotal and not calculate them on the fly based on the quantity ordered, discounts given, and the unit price. All right, moving right along. What's our next step? So we captured this relationship, right? One product and many orders, one order for many products. So we created a sales order table, we created a junction table. Moving right along. One sales order can generally result in many shipments, and one shipment is related to one sales order. So obviously shipment is another event, right? So here the equivalent of shipment when I was buying things is inventory receipt, right? So shipments that are made by my supplier, for me, they're inventory receipts. Truck brings inventory, I unload the truck, put it in the inventory, that's my inventory receipt. In the sales order, in the sales process, I don't receive inventory, I actually send it out of the doors. So, and that's called shipment. So shipments. So since they're analog of the inventory receipts, only I don't receive an inventory, I send it out, I'm going to straightforward copy paste inventory receipts, and every time when I paste it goes to some weird places. Okay, so right here, I'm going to put inventory. Well, it's not inventory receipts really, right? In the sales process, it's shipments. Okay, let me center that. Alright, so obviously sales orders and shipments are related. I ship things out of the door because they were ordered. So therefore I put a relationship line here. And let's see, what do I have? One order generates many shipments, but one shipment is for one sales order. So therefore I'm gonna say copy paste. Okay, one shipment is done for one sales order. One shipment is done for one sales order, and one order, let me pick up this one right here. One order can generally result in many shipments. Again, the example of that you saw in the SAP individual exercise, when I had one sales order, but two shipments, one done today, another done tomorrow, right? One sales order generated many shipments. Okay, so let's go back and create a new schema, right? Shipments. And that's okay. Well, first let me create primary key, right? So each table must have a primary key shipment. So here we have inventory. Where is that? Inventory receipt ID. And obviously here I'm gonna have shipment ID, right? Shipment ID. No underscores because it's a primary key in this table. And I have to underline that to say that this is my primary key, okay? This is an event, right? Shipment is an event. So each time when we record an event, we must record the date. So here, when I have inventory receipt date, very similarly, I have shipment date. Shipment underscore date. Okay, very good. Next one. The rule which applies always. If you have a one-to-many relationship, then you have to take primary key from one side of the relationship and record that as a column in the many side of the relationship as the foreign key. So therefore, sales order ID must go inside the shipments as the foreign key. Okay. So over here, I'm gonna say SOID. That was my primary key, but because it's a foreign key, I'm gonna put underscore. If you remember, that's the rule that I discussed. It's my rule that I use. It's not a universal rule. If I have a primary key, I avoid using underscores. If I have a foreign key coming from some other table, I use underscore just to show that this is not native for this table. It comes from outside. So here, sales order ID is the foreign key. All right. Now what else is missing? Well, true or false, just like what we had before. On the in the shipment, I don't really know how many units I'm shipping out, right? So shipment can be for the entire sales order, or it can be for part of the sales order, right? So from that standpoint, one shipment can contain some of the items that were on the original purchase order, right? So in one shipment, I can ship many items, and one item can be shipped on many shipments, right? So therefore, from that standpoint, here I have let's see, another shape right here, right? Relationship between shipments and items is many to many, actually, right? So I'm gonna copy paste this one right here. Okay, one item. Whoa. All right, this one right here. One item can be part of many shipments, obviously, and one shipment can contain many items, right? So in one shipment, I can send out 5 professional bikes and also 20 helmets. Totally possible. All right, so that means that I need another junction table. just like I had here, right? Inventory receipts, I can receive one purchase order in many different receipts. One receipt can actually contain of many items, and one item can participate in many receipts. Same thing here, right? One shipment can contain many items, one item can be sent out in many shipments. So therefore, I'm going to erase this line right here, okay? I'm going to copy and paste this table right here. All right. And again, just like what we did with sales order line items, that was a junction table. When you create junction table, what used to be many, it moves on the side of the junction table. And instead of that, the original tables receive the one cardinality, right? So this one goes right here. And this one goes right here, okay? And I have to link them, obviously. So there is a relationship between shipments and junction table, and I have to rename it, by the way, right? So when I received items from my vendors, from my suppliers, I call them items inventory receipts. So now, because I'm sending things out, I'm gonna call them items shipments, right? Shipments, okay? And obviously it's related to items as well, so I'm gonna have this link right here, okay? Now at that point you probably start seeing that the sales process almost mirrors the purchasing process, right? The only difference is this is the stuff that we buy from our suppliers, and this is the stuff that we send to our customers, okay? So as I was saying at the beginning of this lecture, these two processes look very similar in terms of how the database is structured and what kind of stuff we record in the database, okay? So items, shipments. Okay, so this is my junction table. Therefore, I'm going to create items underscore shipments, okay? And I'm going to capitalize the table name, okay? So just like any junction table, I have to take the primary key from table 1 and primary key from table 2, put them in the junction table, and combine them to create a combined primary key. So from table items, I have item underscore ID. Again, underscore just signifies that this is a foreign key. From table shipments, I have shipment underscore ID. Again, underscore is for the foreign key, right? And I underline both of them to show that this is my combined primary key, right? All right. So each record in the table items shipments has item ID that tells me which item I'm sending, and the shipment ID which tells me in which shipment I'm sending that item. So what's missing? Quantity, obviously, right? So today I'm sending 5 professional bikes. So the shipment ID for today's shipment is, I don't know, 00129. And the bike, professional bike, is item material ID in my table 057. How many units do I send? 5. Well, I have to be able to record that, right? So over here, I'm gonna say quantity shipped. Quantity underscore shipped. Okay. Shipped. All right. And that's it for now. All right. So I've dealt with this one, with this table. Okay. All right. What's next on our plate? So we kind of recorded shipments, right? And now cash receipts. Each shipment results in one cash receipt, one cash receipt one cash receipt can be done for many shipments. So again, it's the same situation as we dealt with in the individual SAP exercise, right? When we created shipment 1 and shipment 2, but we invoiced that in one invoice, and we collected one cash receipt, one payment on both of these shipments. So each shipment is done in one cash receipt, but one cash receipt can be for many shipments. So here I'm gonna have to say, before that I had payments because I paid for the purchases to my customers. Now I'm actually collecting money from my customers. So therefore I'm gonna call it cash and cash receipts. Cash receipts. Okay. So this is an event. So just similarly, like I said, it's very much like purchasing process. Sales process is very much like purchasing process. So I'm gonna say copy paste the table right here. Okay. All right. Let's put it right here. So instead of payments, which I'm sending out, I'm gonna call it cash underscore receipts. And obviously cash receipts, as we just saw on the slides, right? Cash receipts are related to shipments. So I'm gonna go back and say, let's link cash receipts and shipments. All right. How exactly should I assign my cardinalities? Shipment, one shipment is one cash receipt, but one cash receipt, many shipments. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to first copy this one right here. Okay. So again, it was pasted somewhere. Come on. Let me delete that, and I want to copy this thing here and paste it right here. Okay. So one cash receipt is for one shipment for one cash receipt. Is that how it's done? Each shipment results in one cash receipt, right? So one shipment, one cash receipt, but one cash receipt can be for many shipments combined. Okay, so one cash receipt is for many shipments. That's how we do it. All right, very good. Let me save that, and let's go back over here. That obviously generates a new table, right? Cash receipts. All right, I'm gonna capitalize cash receipts because it's a table name. Well, cash receipt ID. Cash underscore receipt underscore ID. This is primary key, so I have to underline that. Whoa. Underline that. It's an event, so therefore we have a timestamp, right? So cash receipt date. Okay, very good. What else? Just like with payment type, right? Remember, we had payment type. What's that? Well, I can send the payment. It's not usually I don't send cash, right? But actually I can make a payment in cash, right? Because I can physically drive to my supplier and buy things from them for cash. That's possible. Or I can send a check, or I can send a wire transfer. So that was the payment type. Same here, okay? Cash receipts. If my customer physically comes to my warehouse and buy things from me and pays with cash, I can collect cash, or I can receive a check from them, or I can receive wire transfer, right? So therefore, just like I had payment type, here I have cash receipt type. So I can receive, what did I do? I can receive cash. Oh God. Did I erase things? Let me go back. Yeah, I erased things. Okay. Cash. No, forward. Cash receipt type. Okay. So I can either receive cash, or I can receive check. or I can receive wire transfer. The amount, right? So the amount cash receipt for a certain amount. For some reason in the payments, oh, here is the amount, right? I didn't see that, the amount. So obviously when I receive the I don't know, $1,500 from my customers, not only I have to record that I received that by check, but also that I received $1,500, right? And that's it for now. Okay, so when I received the cash, the date, in what form the cash came in, it was cash, or is it check, or is it wire transfer, and how much I received, right? So that's it for now. Alright, I'm gonna save that, and let's go back. So we have dealt with this portion. Okay, we're actually coming close to the end. So let's go to the next slide, and here I'm gonna say one cash receipt is deposited into one bank account. One bank account is related to many cash receipts, right? I can deposit many times in the same bank account, but each time when I receive payment from my customers, it goes, I'm assuming, in its entirety into one bank. I mean, I can theoretically split it between two banks, right? But here I'm going to make an assumption. When I receive the cash, it goes into one account in its entirety. Okay, and the funny thing is, I actually have bank account already because it was linked with my payments. So, but this is the table which records cash going out, right? I'm using the same bank for deposits, right? I can pay my suppliers from the bank account, or I can deposit payments from my customers into the same bank account. So therefore, I don't really need actually to create the bank account table, because it was already created in the previous process. All I have to do really is to record the relationship between the cash receipts and the bank account. So let's see. One cash receipt is deposited into one bank account. One bank account is related to many cash receipts. Okay, so therefore the link here is this. Bank accounts are related to cash receipts, obviously, just like that. One cash receipt goes into one bank account. I can have many bank accounts as a business, right? One bank account in Bank of America, another is in Wells Fargo, and one bank account obviously can be used for many cash receipts, right? I can deposit many times, so therefore it's one to many. Okay, so therefore here, because it's one to many relationship. Oh, by the way, we didn't actually record the this one to many relationship. We're about to do that actually. Okay, so but let's deal with that one first. Okay, so because it's one to many, the primary key from one should go into the many end of the relationship. So therefore, bank account ID, I guess, must be a foreign key in the cash receipts. So bank account primary key is the account number. So therefore, I have to take that, copy, and paste that into the cash receipts. And there should be no underscore because it's not a primary key, it's a foreign key, right? And you can see that this is actually reflecting the same structure as what I had for the purchases, right? So cash receipts are equivalent of payments in the purchasing process. So I have account number as my foreign key in the payments table, and I have an account number as the foreign key in my cash receipts table. Okay, but the story is not over. And again, one thing that we forgot is shipments and cash receipts are related as one to many. So therefore, cash receipts should be cash receipt ID should be a foreign key. One goes into many, right? Into the table shipments. So cash receipt ID right here. Actually, I shouldn't have an underscore here, right? Cash receipt ID. Okay, so that primary key should go into the shipments right here as my foreign key. So I have to paste it right here and no underscore. And again, it's very similar to inventory receipts, right? Here, let's see. Inventory receipts should receive a payment ID. Did that? Inventory receipts. We actually did not insert, but the payment ID, weirdly enough, is on the items inventory receipts. Let's see, items inventory receipts. There was a payment ID here. Oh, it's the wrong place, really, right? So I made a boo-boo, made an error in my previous design, right? So really, the payment ID should go not in the items inventory receipts, but in the inventory receipts themselves. So let me actually correct this, okay? So items inventory receipts, this payment ID should not be here. Let me erase that. It should actually be in the inventory receipts themselves, right here, right? There. So for each inventory receipt, I have to record where it came from, what was the supplier, who received the items, what was the employee ID, and with what payment ID it was paid. So very similarly here, right? And you can see that because it's on the many end of the relationship, right? Inventory receipts is on the many end of the relationship from the payments, suppliers, purchase orders, and also employees. So therefore, purchase order ID should be here, payment ID should be here, supplier ID should be here, and employee ID should be here, right? And that's what happens. So inventory receipts, where are they? Yeah, here. Purchase order ID, supplier ID, employee ID, and payment ID. So similar thing you can see over here, right? With my shipments, okay? It's on the many end from cash receipts, from sales orders, and we don't have suppliers and employees yet, but we will. Okay, so therefore my items, my shipments should receive sales order ID and the cash receipt ID. I already posted the cash receipt ID, right? Okay, but the story will continue. So we recorded this relationship, right? Each time when I have cash receipt, it goes into the bank. So therefore, we have to record what is the oh, I didn't record that yet, right? So the account information. So here, when I record the payments, account number right here, okay? So because it's one to many, bank accounts and the payments, so I have to take account number and I have to record that against the payment. Same thing should happen with cash receipts, right? So I am recording the cash receipt date, the type, is it cash, is it check, is it wire transfer, the amount, and the account number. Oh, I recorded that already actually, sorry, apologize. Alright, so that is done. So what's next? And the next, I have actually two more things, right? So let's see how we're doing on time. Well, we're a little bit over, but that part should be pretty quick, okay? Sales order, shipments, and cash receipt are related to one customer. So each time when I receive the sales order, it's from one customer. When I do the shipment, it goes out to one customer. And when I receive the cash, it comes from one customer. But the customer can be related to many sales orders, shipments, and cash receipts, right? So, and in this case, it's actually very similar to supplier. When I'm buying from a supplier, and that's purchase orders. But when I'm selling, my sales orders, shipments, and cash receipts are coming from one customer. So therefore, in the sales process, what used to be supplier in the purchases, now it's customers, right? So I'm going to put table right here. So instead of calling them suppliers, this table I'm going to call customers. And by the way, customers in our big scheme of things are agents, right? So suppliers are my agents for the purchase orders. For the sales orders, my counterparty is customers. Okay. So I have to have another table right here, okay, for customers. And I'm going to capitalize that, make it bold. All right. Obviously, primary key is customer ID. No underscore, it's a primary key, right? Okay, underline though. And what do I need to know about the customers? Just like very similar to the suppliers, really. Okay, name. Customers can be physical people, John Smith, or it can be business, Philly Bikes. Okay, address, and address has what? Address has street. Oh, I can actually pretty much duplicate the same structures I have with supplies, right? Street, obviously city, obviously state, obviously zip, contact name. So if my customer name is a business, Philly Bikes, contact name is John Smith, and he is the general manager, for example, right? And let's say email address, right? Okay, so these are my customers, and obviously each customer can place multiple orders, receive multiple shipments, and send me multiple cash receipts, right? So therefore over here I'm gonna have one customer is related to let's say many sales orders, right? Okay, over here, then it can be related to send me many payments, so I receive many cash receipts from them, right? And also I make many shipments to one customer. So therefore the many portion, I should have three of them, right? One customer sends me many payments, so I have many cash receipts from them. One customer places, generally speaking, many orders, and one customer I send many shipments to one customer. Okay, but each time when I receive cash, it comes from one customer. Oh god, it's here. All right. Each time when I receive cash, it comes from one customer. Each time when I make a shipment, it goes out to one customer, and each time when the sales order is placed, it comes from one. Come on. Oh god. It comes from one. Sales orders comes from one customer, like right here. Okay, you can see that the structure for the sales with customers is very similar to the structure with purchases when I'm dealing with suppliers, right? But what does that mean in terms of the database? Because customers on one end, and cash receipts, shipments, and sales orders are on many end. Again, the same rule. One primary key goes into the many as the foreign key. So therefore, I have to insert customer ID with underscore, right, into the sales orders. So over here, I'm gonna say customer underscore ID. Okay. Shipments also have customer ID, right? Customer underscore ID because it's foreign key. And cash receipts also have customer ID. Customer underscore ID. That's also a foreign key. Alright? And the last thing on our list is employees, right? Each step, each event is being handled and processed by my employees. So employee can process many sales orders, many shipments, and many cash receipts, but sales order, shipment, and receipt, each one of them is processed by one employee. And actually, I have table employees already because I use that for my purchasing, right? So here's my employees, and I'm going to create the same structure. Okay, so over here, I'm going to say one employee handles, generally speaking, many cash receipts. All right. So over here, yeah, it's gonna look a little weird. I was hoping it will look similar to that, but no. Also, one employee handles many shipments. So I'm gonna insert another connector here. One employee handles many shipments. Oh god, how do I do that? Yeah, I don't want to mess with that right now. I'll find a way to make it look cute. And also one employee handles many sales orders, right? Generally speaking. So this one right here. Okay. So, and again, it's very similar structure. It's going to be, all right. one sales order is handled by one employee, one shipment is handled by one employee, and one cash receipt is handled by one employee. And one employee can handle obviously many sales orders, many cash receipts, and many shipments. So therefore I have to take many and put it over here. One employee handles many sales orders, one employee handles many shipments, and one employee handles many cash receipts. Okay, this is my structure. Let me zoom out for you to appreciate how cool this process is actually. So this is pretty much everything. Okay, the part on the top is purchasing, the part at the bottom is sales. Note that bank accounts are involved in both payments going out externally to the suppliers and payments received from customers coming in. Items are also participating in both sales and purchases. When we buy things, we record them, right? And that goes to increase my inventory on hand. Okay, that's why, by the way, if you look at the items, units on hand, right? Each time when I record inventory receipts, that increases inventory on hand. Each time when I record shipments, that decreases inventory on hand, right? But technically, after each time I record receipts, inventory receipts, and shipments, the result in my table should reflect both inventory coming in and inventory coming out. So at any point in time, this number in the table items, units on hand, should actually reflect how many units I have at the moment after all the inventory was coming in and all the shipments were coming out. Okay. Also, employees, right, participate in all these things. They create purchase orders and sales orders. They receive an inventory and they send out an inventory. They record payments that I send out to my suppliers, and they record payments that are coming in from my customers. So this is a fairly comprehensive database that basically can record both purchases and sales. And one last thing that I have to do is I didn't record this one-to-many relationships, right? So employee ID must be inserted as the foreign key into the cash receipts, shipments, and sales orders. So let's do that. I'm gonna zoom in. So sales orders right here, I should have employee ID underscore because it's a foreign key. Shipments over here, I should have employee underscore ID as the foreign key, and cash receipts as well right here, right? Employee underscore ID as the foreign key. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my database. Okay, I think this class went over time for about like 15 minutes, but that was a good exercise, and that hopefully after you watch this video, that will create for you a pretty complete picture of what the corporate databases look like. And this is not actually complex structure at all. Okay, we've made a bunch of assumptions. Okay, for example, we have assumed that cash receipt goes in its entirety in one bank, while in actuality I can split it between like let's say I receive $1,000 from customers, 500 I put in Wachovia. Well, there is no Wachovia anymore, right? It's called Wells Fargo. 500 I put in Wells Fargo, and 500 I put in the bank account, right? So I can split. So therefore there can be a junction table right here. Okay. Another thing that we didn't record actually was invoicing, right? So in the SAP exercise, if you remember, between the inventory receipt and the payment, there is an invoice, right? After I receive inventory, I receive the invoice, and only then I record the payment. So therefore, technically, there is another step right here, invoice, which we didn't record. Same thing here. Between the shipment and the moment when I receive the cash, there is an invoice that goes out to the customers. We didn't record the invoices, so technically there should be another table with invoices. So there are a lot of teeny tiny details how things can happen that are not reflected in this database, and it's already looking fairly complex, right? So the actual databases that record sales orders, shipments, cash receipts, disbursements, inventory receipts, purchases, the actual corporate database is much more complex than this one right here. So this is a kind of a simplified version. if you will. All right, I'm gonna stop right here, and in the next class we're going to continue looking at the sales process. We're going to create a few system flow charts for a couple of ways how the processes can happen as far as the sales process goes. Okay, so this is the end of this video.